Back in 2018, when Microsoft purchased Compulsion Games, I was not a fan of the decision. I had played their previous two games, Contrast and We Happy Few, and thought they were completely, thoroughly mediocre. But at the time, I thought, well, maybe with a bigger budget and a clear direction, is it possible they could create something unique and exciting? Well, I'm here to say after getting some time playing through the preview build of South of Midnight, not only am I surprised, but I'm quite looking forward to the game now. What's going on, everybody? It's Randall Thor 19, the man with the million, back again with another video. Hope everybody's doing well. You know the drill, hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, please subscribe if you haven't, because today we are talking about my experience with the preview of South of Midnight. Now, this is a very interesting position I find myself in, because as a person who has continuously sort of downplayed Compulsion games in the past because I didn't like their previous two games, I find myself kind of eating crow here. Now, granted, it's just a preview. We have to wait and see how the full game plays out, but during my 55 minutes playing through Chapter 3, I think what we have here is something that is going to be quite special, and a clear step up from Compulsion's game's previous work. I think for most people, it was last year at Xbox Game Showcase when they finally showed off the gameplay that anticipation started to kind of leak out for South of Midnight. I know that's when I really saw it and thought to myself, okay, this might be different than Contrast and We Happy Few, and might be a game I would enjoy. So when I finally got access to this preview, I was looking forward to jumping in and see what was going to happen, and we did get access to one chapter, Chapter 3, so very early on in the game, and it took about an hour to get through. Not only did I play through it once, but I actually played through it for a second time to get a better handling on the combat and some of the exploration bits that South of Midnight has going for it. But I think the first thing that most people will notice while watching this video and reading some of the previews out there from friends who have played the game is the vibes and the atmosphere for South of Midnight are on another level. They're immaculate, as the kids would say. The presentation is fantastic. I actually really like the stop motion in the cutscenes when two characters are talking and the facial animations on those characters. It's absolutely great. However, not a big fan of the stop motion within the game while you're playing through it. There is an option to turn it off, and I did so immediately. So South of Midnight is an action-adventure combat platformer that is really kind of distinctly two separate parts. You have the combat, which takes place almost by itself in certain gated areas, and then you have everything else, the traversal, the linear nature of the game, the exploration, all those things. But at least in my 1 hour playthrough, all that came together to really build a cohesive whole and something that I was really surprised by the end. Now, the game starts off, you play as Hazel, your house is swept away in a terrible storm, and you're looking for your mother, and this is where you come across your weaving powers. You know, you can do a pull, you can do a push, there's a projectile, and you use them throughout the world to kind of manifest items. You'll see them throughout the video when I'm platforming around. You might be like, oh, there's this ghostly looking plank. Well, you can use left bumper, this projectile that will send out that makes the plank real for a certain amount of time, and then you use those powers within the combat section. As for what you're doing in Chapter 3 itself, you're going across the world, which I think is beautiful. I love this idea of the southern bayou, the swamps, and like the cool characters that I know you're gonna meet. I mean, we meet some really eccentric characters in Chapter 3 by itself. So that already kind of gripped me from the start, was just the visual look of the game and how it performs, because it performs pretty well on the Xbox Series X, 60 frames. I did notice some screen tearing, but it's a preview build, so hopefully that stuff is fixed by the end. Didn't really notice any frame rate drops. But as you continue on, you'll meet the catfish, and he wants you to help him get unstuck. There's a tree holding him up, and basically you go out and you fill up this bottle with pain And I don't really want to explain anymore. I want you guys to discover it by yourself, because the story does seem like a big aspect of what South of Midnight is trying to do. And by the end of this preview, I was looking at my calendar being like, is it April yet? Because I want the whole game now. I do want to make mention that at least in Chapter 3, the world itself is completely linear. I thought maybe when the first gameplay video came out and you had these abilities, I thought maybe there would be a Metroidvania-esque nature to the game, and I don't really know because we've only played one chapter, but at least from what I played, it is an extremely linear action-adventure game with the platforming for you to get through certain parts, but there are kind of exploration aspects to it. There's always a path you can take that isn't on the main path. And if you want to see what the main path is, you can press in the right stick and there'll be this weave that shows you the right way to go. So if you do go off in the beaten path and see more cool stuff, you'll find some collectibles that will explain, give you more background of the lore of what's going on in this world. And you'll also get these XP increases called floofs. It's kind of like the currency. You'll collect them, which you can then spend on upgrades, which you basically use during combat. So it's not like completely there's only one direction to go, but really there is only one direction to go. During this level, we unlock some of the abilities that you're probably going to use throughout the entire game. In really a short span of time, you unlock double jump, glide, and wall run in this chapter, and they feel great to use. Like, I know usually when you play these platformer games, every platformer has its own special, unique way they control, and sometimes, when you first start playing it, maybe the jump might be too springy, or you might not jump high enough, or the control might be a little loosey-goosey, if you know what I mean. And it did kind of feel that way because a couple times I fell off some branches into the water, but I mean, within 10 minutes, you're essentially a pro. You're not going to be making any of those mistakes, so it controls well. The game is quite the looker. I love the setting. The cutscenes are fantastic. I mean, the music, oh God, let me tell you about the music. The music is absolutely top tier, phenomenal stuff here. Just the background music as you platform your way across the area, when you get into combat, when you kind of fill up your bottle, just the motif that will play. And then later on at the very end, there's this like audio visual sequence with a song that plays that really caught my attention. And that's when I thought South of Midnight took that next step up. It really kind of went into the next gear. And I want you guys to discover it yourself. But music plays an important part. And even like the story of like, you do this stuff with the bottle and you gotta get like this person's pain. It is a dark story that they're telling, which, I appreciate. We're all mature adults here. Oh man, what's playing out here? Like, that's terrible what just happened. So if they keep up with the music and the environments and the story, this game is going to be a lot of people's like favorite games of the year, I think. And then we come to the other aspect of the game. Remember I told you before, there's the combat and all the things you can do in there, but then there was literally everything else. Because now we need to talk about the combat. And I really do feel that this will be the dividing point for a lot of people, because it's kind of completely separate from everything else. All the combat, at least in Chapter 3, takes place in walled off areas. You enter an area and all of a sudden you can't escape it. There's black rot everywhere. And enemies will spawn, you beat the enemies, and essentially when you beat them all, the combat will end, and then you move on with the rest of the game until you find another combat section. So it's definitely divided into those two parts. And some people will be like, the combat's great. Other people will be like, the combat is just good, it's serviceable. Even in the settings for the game, one of the accessibility options I did notice, although it did say it's a work in progress, so we'll see if it makes it in, there's actually an option to skip the combat in the game. So when you come up to one of these combat scenarios, I guess in the final game, you'll be able to skip it. I mean, that's not how I would play, but there are probably people out there that are like, you know what? I really don't want to have to deal with this. They do give you 5 different difficulty levels to play through. There's Storyteller, Easy, Normal, Hard, and a custom one. So the people who just want to experience what Compulsion is cooking with the story and the cutscenes and the Southern Gothic things in this game, they can do so without being troubled by the combat. Now, I thought the combat was good. I didn't think it was great, but then it was also sort of difficult to get into the flow of combat right away. The enemies do take off a lot of health, and in each one of these arenas, there is a big green health icon that you can pick up and restore your health, because the enemies, they do take off a lot of damage on normal, and I did think the combat was a little tough. I wasn't really used to dodging everything, which is the main way you kind of get through attacks. And you have multiple enemies on screen doing different type of attacks at you. There's your normal enemy that will come right up to you, try to slash you or do a world spin to attack you. There's an enemy that will spit out little flies at you, and another enemy that we came across was one that will also spit out like a red blob of goo at you in two different ways, one super fast and one slow. Now, I mentioned earlier about the weaving abilities, about the push and the pull and the projectile on left bumper. You use these in combat on a cooldown, and when you upgrade your abilities, they're usually like, hey, the enemy takes more damage. So my first time playing through it, I was kind of getting hit. I wasn't really having the best time with the combat until later on when I really got a feel for it. And then I was out there dodging like a maniac, using my pull to pull enemy towards me and attacking them, or pushing one of these exploding birds back at its nest to do damage. And anytime you beat an enemy, you do have to go up to it and unravel it, and you will get a little health back, but not a lot. I'm very curious to see how combat progresses throughout the rest of the game. I believe within this hour, there was only 5 combat arenas, and I think one of them was optional. Like, you didn't have to do it unless you explored. So I'm curious to see, like, do I earn any more abilities? What sort of new skills do I get to make the combat more enjoyable? I definitely do feel like for a lot of people, combat is going to be the one sticking point. I didn't think it was great, but I also didn't think it was bad. It's just kind of in that, oh, this is good. It's just that everything else that the game does, I think, is top-notch. From the cutscenes, to the setting, to the story, to the music, to the presentation. It's really top-tier stuff. It's just that the combat is just, I don't know, it seems to be just there, and I really want to know how it's improved upon and what your upgrades are and everything. But when taken as a complete whole, I really enjoyed my preview of South of Midnight. And like I said before, I'm looking at the calendar being like, can it be April yet? Because this is a game that now is on my, top anticipated list. It was a game that I wasn't sure was going to be any good because of the pedigree of the studio. Now, after having played it, I'm like, yo, I'm really want to play this now. I think this game has the potential to be something really cool and unique. Anyways, guys, that's my preview for South of Midnight. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe, all that good stuff. Hopefully, everybody, you have a great day. Thank you so much for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.